It's hard to keep up with what we're studying. This is lesson 8. Winning a spouse to Jesus is what we've been talking about. That's what this, one of the main uh, thrusts that Peter's trying to get across is the importance of a Christian living a faithful life if they have a spouse that is not a Christian. Because by the life you live, your devotion, your dedication, if your religion is, true, not just go to church religion, but if it's really true, by the very life you live, you have a good chance of converting your own spouse. And it's very important to win your spouse. That's what we're supposed to do. That's one of the purposes of marriage, is we're supposed to get our spouse to heaven. If we fail to do that, then we failed in one of the purposes of marriage. Actually, it may be the first and foremost purpose of marriage. I made a list one time of 5 things, 5 purposes of marriage, and I think at the top of the list, that's what I had, to save your spouse. Anyway, that's what we've been talking about, the power of example. Mostly, Peter's talking to women, wives likewise, because it appears that historically women have been converted to Jesus easier than men. I see that in India all the time. There may be 100 women, there may be 10 men. Sometimes not that many men. Men do not convert as easily as women. Probably, I'd say, because of pride, an unwillingness to bend the knee to another. Women, on the other hand, they don't have a problem with bending a knee to Jesus. But in the text, what Peter is talking about is being submissive in our various roles in life. Citizens, employees must be submissive, and similarly, wives must be submissive to their husbands. Someone has to be the head of the family, and the Lord chose the man to be the head of the family rather than the woman. It's got nothing to do with skill. It's got nothing to do with being more intelligent, rather, I should say, I guess. It's not about a woman being inferior. That's just the way the Lord ordained it to be. So likewise, wives, just as citizens, just as employees, wives too must be submissive. In our day and time, that really doesn't happen a lot, but we will be called into account for that one day. The role of the first century woman was a terrible place from a lot of people, mostly from the Greek Gentile peoples. A woman was considered inferior to a slave. Now, that wasn't the attitude of the Jew, but it was the attitude of most of the world at that time. The woman was at the bottom of the totem pole, but not in the New Testament church. In Christ, all of that would change. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, Paul said, "There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." In Christ, we are one because spirits are sexless beings, and we know that. Well, you and I are sexless beings, okay? So we're actually equal, male and female. We're sexless beings. Once we get out of our bodies, there's not going to be any sexes. There's just going to be spirits like angels. But for that reason, we're to understand that in Christ we're all on the same footing. In the eyes of God, we're all equal. Can a believer be married to a non-believer? This was a question that came up a lot in the first century. Most of the non-believers were heathen or pagan, and if a woman became a Christian, the question came up a lot of times: should she remain married to this non-believing husband? Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. A woman who has a husband who does not believe, she's a Christian, he is not. If he is willing to live with her, let her not divorce him. If he doesn't prohibit her from being a Christian, if he doesn't care if she's a Christian, everything's fine. Don't disturb the marriage that God made. That, even if there's a reason, even if some do not obey the word, without a word they may be won by the conduct of their wives, when they observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear. That's what I said a moment ago. If the woman lives a faithful life to the Lord, there's a good possibility that she may lead her husband to Christ. She'll have a lot of influence on him. Women always do, and she could influence him that way. We've all seen this happen a lot in life. Women live a Christian life, the biggest part of their life, and in latter years, a lot of times their husbands become a Christian. That has a lot to do with the example of the wife. It's not a sermon or anything like that. The devotion of the wife is what got the husband's attention. Christ meant so much to her husband. She had hope that he didn't have. She could pray to the creator of the universe, which he could not do. She was so much better off than he was, and he learned that over the years. And he chose, therefore, to become a Christian. So it's important to live the right kind of a life. In 1 Corinthians 7:14, Paul said basically the same thing. The unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife. The unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Otherwise your children will be unclean, but now they are holy. I can't think of anything that's been more abused than this particular verse. There's been a lot of preachers who have said the husband being sanctified, the husband is saved because of the devoted devoted life the wife lived. Well, there is a sense where that is true, in that she led him to Christ. But just because he lives with this Christian woman, that doesn't mean he's going to be saved. Okay? He's sanctified because he's in the presence of this godly person all of his life. The same thing is true about the children. If the wife left the husband would get the children. The children would therefore be without the influence of Christ. They would be unclean. They would probably become a heathen or a pagan. Therefore, they are to maintain the marriage, continue the marriage. You may save your husband, and you will definitely have an effect on your children. I think it's 70-something% of children grow up to become faithful Christians if they live with a devoted woman, a devoted mother. It shoots up to 90-something% if the husband's devoted as well, though. But if he will not let her be a Christian, okay, I'm not living with a Christian woman. Well, what does she do in a case like that? If the unbeliever departs, let him depart. A brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases. They are not bound to the marriage vow. They're not obliged to maintain the marriage if the husband is unwilling to live with her. Christ comes first. Okay, if he says no, well then it's time to leave. That's okay. You're not under bondage to the marriage vow. Can she remarry? The answer is no. She's still married, but she can leave. God has called us to peace. We try to live a peaceful existence. Sometimes it's not possible, and we have to do what we have to do. The Lord always comes first. I've watched women in India cry and cry and cry and cry because they're so afraid to become a Christian, because if they go home, they're going to be in big trouble. Over there, it creates a lot of problems for a woman. If her husband puts her out she's by herself from now on. That's the way she's going to live. She can't remarry. Um, she won't have her kids any longer. They'll be taken away from her. Chances are pretty good she's not going to be able to work and support herself. More than likely, the only way she's going to get by is to become a beggar. Now, this is the kind of a decision these women got to make. Am I going to become a Christian or not? And it happens all the time. I mean, it happens a lot. There's a lot of men that will not let their wives become Christians. Most of the women do not become Christians for that very reason. But there are some who do from time to time, and it always amazes me. And I don't know what happens when they go home. Of course, we're gone by then, but it probably isn't good, and it's always very painful. Fortunately, of course, the church community is there, and they'll help her get by. She won't have to be a beggar like a heathen woman would. But it's a horrible situation to be put in. It's saying, well, I would do this. Well, it's easy to say that when you don't have to do it. But when you're in that situation, it gets tough, boy. It gets tough. And that's the kind of situations that existed in the first century. And they still exist in our world today. It's tough life. Submission, however, does not imply moral, intellectual, or spiritual inferiority on the part of the woman. Okay? You got to understand that. A lot of times women are offended by their role in the church, but I don't think they should be offended if you just understand why things have been done the way they're done. It's got nothing to do with being inferior. In 1 Timothy 2, 12 through 14, Paul gives the answer why the woman has got the submissive role instead of the lead role. She could have had the lead role, but instead she's got the submissive role. I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. And he tells us why. First of all, Adam was formed first. The man came before the woman. Since he was formed first, God chose him to be the head of the house. Secondly, Adam wasn't deceived by the serpent. Eve was deceived, and she fell into the transgression. Eve believed the serpent's lie. She thought she would be as wise as God if she ate the fruit. Adam went into it with his eyes wide open. He knew it was a lie. He wasn't deceived. He just wanted to keep Eve happy. He liked her a lot, I guess, and if she wanted him to do it, he would do it. And that's the second reason. There are two reasons why women have the submissive role. First, Adam came first. Number two is that Eve was deceived by the serpent, whereas Adam was not. He knew the serpent was lying. Therefore, the woman got the submissive role rather than the lead role. And that's why God made that decision, the decision he made. Wives, be submissive to your own husbands. To your own husbands, not all men. Submissive to your own husbands. Your husband is the person you submit to, not your next door neighbor. It's not the fact that men are greater than women. It's the woman being submissive to the husband in the home. There can only be one head. Two heads, you got chaos. There can only be one, and God chose the man. And that's the way that goes. Both men and women are required to be in submission. This is why it shouldn't be considered a shame. Men have to be in submission in various roles in their life. Men have to be in submission to civil authority, to government. Chapter 2, Peter talked about that. Men have to be in submission to their employers. When you work for someone, you have to submit to them. You work for them. They don't work for you. And if you're too proud, then go somewhere else and try to find a job. You're not going to find one. Men have to be in submission to civil authority. You've got to have civil authority, or you're going to have chaos. So God created government, and we must submit to the rules. And the same thing is true with employers. We as men have to submit in various spheres in our life. In the home, the woman has to submit there. She has to submit as well to the others, but in the home she has to submit to the husband. The same thing is true in the church. Man has the lead role in the church. For example, all people have to be in submission to the eldership in the church, have to submit to those who have the rule over you. That's both men and women. In various roles in the church, men are to take the lead in those roles and not women. Does that mean that women can't do anything? Hardly the case. They can still do a lot of things, and a lot of the things they do are extremely important. It's just when it comes to authority, positions of authority, women are not allowed to have authority over a man in the church. Could a woman teach a man at work? Well, of course she can. It's got nothing to do with the rules. We're talking about the rules in the home, the rules in the church. If a man came up to a woman at work and said, "What do I have to do to be saved?" She doesn't have to say, "Well, let me go get my husband. I'll have him tell you." She can tell him. There's nothing wrong with that. There are people that did in the Bible. Priscilla and Aquila, they were both involved in teaching Apollos. It was a husband and wife tag team, more or less, and they were both involved in teaching him. We're talking about in the church and in the home, okay? In civil authorities, employers, everybody's in submission. In the church and the home, women must submit to the male. It's God's rule, so it's the best way to do it. Chaste means purity of conduct in all respects. It doesn't mean a person who goes to church. One of the worst things a person can do is just go to church and then not really be devoted to the Lord. It'll really affect your family if that's the way you live, because they're going to know that you're not the real deal. Everybody at church saying, "Well, you know, he's a great guy, blah, 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 blah." But these are the people that see you 24 hours a day. And if you're not truly devoted to the Lord, they pick up on that. They're going to know it. And one of the worst things we can do is to have a pretense of being a faithful Christian and not living the life. That's hypocrisy. And of course, nobody likes hypocrisy. Not even our own families. Nobody's going to say anything because they love us, but they don't like it. They don't like it any more than anybody. So you can do a lot of harm. The woman could do a lot of harm where her husband and children are concerned if she's not chaste, if she's not truly devoted to the Lord. A woman who is godly, a woman who prays to the Lord, a woman who speaks like Christians would speak. The Lord's will be done. We'll have to wait and see what the Lord would have us to do, or we'll have to see what the Lord's decision is on this matter. This is a woman who has learned what the Christian manner is, has developed that character within herself, and once she does that, it can be seen. People see it. And that's what a chaste woman does. She's a woman who is truly devoted to the Lord, not somebody who just goes to church. That doesn't draw people, that repels people. But a person who is truly devoted, they have a lot of power in the realm of influencing others. Accompanied by fear. Fear generally means respect. Sometimes it means fear like we know it, but she's not supposed to be fear her husband. He's not supposed to go in and whip her and all that stuff. Fear means respect. He beholds your chaste, respectful conduct. You're respectful in all facets of life, not just toward him, but you're just a respectful person in general, which includes him. In Ephesians 5:33, Paul said, "Nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband." That's what Peter's talking about as well. We're talking about the women because that's Peter's discussion here. The husband has rules that he is bound to live by, so I don't want the women to think it's all about women. It's not. The man, for example, is required to lay down his life for his wife. She comes first. She is the apple of his eye, so to speak. Everything he does revolves around her to make her happy. She's the center of his universe. That's what the Bible teaches the wife is to be. And of course, if the husband is what he ought to be, it makes it a lot easier for the wife to respect her husband. Respect, we can look at it in the negative sense. It doesn't want to shame or embarrass. That's what respect is. I don't want to shame the Lord. I don't want Jesus to be ashamed of me because of the way I talk or of something I did. Well, the same thing is true about the wife. She respects her husband. She doesn't want to shame or embarrass her husband. She doesn't talk too much. Rattle, 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 rattle. And embarrass her husband because she's nonstop. When you talk so much, you're going to say stuff you shouldn't have said. Anybody that talks so much is going to do that. It just comes with the words. And they don't want to disappoint. It's a person who doesn't want to disappoint another. I don't want to disappoint my Lord. I don't want to disappoint my wife. I don't want to disappoint my children. I don't want to embarrass them either. You see, the same thing is how I feel towards my family. The wife is to feel this way towards her husband, but the man's going to feel this way towards his family also. You don't want to embarrass your family. Kids say, "I wish he wasn't my daddy. He embarrasses me to death." In the positive sense of the word, it hopes to receive approval from. I want approval. When I do something, I want BR to approve of the things I do. Sometimes I have to explain to her why I do the things I do because she thinks I'm a little on the wacky side. But once I explain it to her, what the logic is behind it, then she approves of it because she understands the sense of it. Sometimes it takes a while before that happens, but as the head of the house, I got to do what I got to do. But hopefully she'll come around and understand. Nevertheless, she's supposed to give me the benefit of the doubt, and when the shoe is on the other foot, she wants my approval as well. I'm afraid to do this all about women. I don't want to get flogged after we get out of here. It's also about men, respect-wise and all that. May be warned by the conduct of the wife, may be persuaded to become a Christian because of the way she behaves. It's been said, I'd rather see one sermon live than hear two sermons preached. And of course that's very true. Anybody can preach. It's not really a big deal that somebody preaches. Some people are very skilled at preaching, very articulate, and they can make you believe something that isn't true. Preaching is something that a faithful person can do or a fraud can do. Okay, both do it and both can be successful at it. But a life lived, it's either the real deal or it's not. Okay, it's a real deal or it's not. And the people who's going to know I'm a hypocrite before anybody else is going to be my family. They're the ones that's going to know it first. And this is the power that the wife has over an unbelieving husband. Jesus taught us to let our light shine before men. They may see our good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Through the works that we do, people will be led to Christ. If we have a light shining, sometimes the lights are very, very dim. Now he changes his subject. Do not let your adornment be merely outward. He's not forbidding outward adornment, as some groups believe. Church of God, I think, doesn't let women wear makeup or jewelry or any of that stuff. Do not let your adornment be merely outward. In other words, don't just focus on the outer person. It's not wrong to focus on the outer person, but don't stop there. The arranging the hair, the wearing of gold, putting on fine apparel. Okay, not merely these things. There's got to be more to you than what you wear. Paul said it in like manner. Also, women must adorn themselves in modest apparel with propriety and moderation. Those three words right there. There's a range. What's modest? There's a range. There's the conservative view, and then there is a liberal view. There's a range to modesty, a range to propriety, a range to moderation. When people go beyond and are flaunting themselves, of course they're wrong. And we recognize that. It's not hard to recognize. But within this range, we have to understand that what I consider to be modest may not be what another person considers to be modest. And we have to be careful. We can't be dogmatic on certain things. And, people have historically been very dogmatic about such things. I heard one time of when people were battling over the length of hair. Sometimes they were battling over the length of a woman's hair, sometimes battling over the length of a man's hair. And it's so unfortunate that those things happened, because I don't think any of it was necessary. If folks would have understood the context in which instructions were given about such things, I think a lot of mistakes were made. We need to understand that there is a range. There is indecency, obviously. There is indecency. But it is so hard to define. It's so hard to put into words what indecency is. I believe personally that it begins in the heart. If a woman dresses to flaunt herself before others, then she is being immodest. She may have her body entirely covered and yet be immodest because she's trying to show her wealth, for example. That's immodesty. She could talk too much. That's immodesty. That's impropriety. She could dress in such a way as to be immodest, even though she may have her body covered. How could she be immodest? Because her reason for wearing the garment she was wearing was to arouse men. And this particular garment, the way it was made, had the ability to do that. It's so hard to do when we talk about these things. It's very hard to do. I've thought a lot about it. I've tried to be careful about being too dogmatic. There are things I don't think are modest, okay? I don't know that I can make that a rule for you, though. There is a line that people crosses that everybody knows it's being immodest. It's obvious. It's totally out of our culture. It's like the women at Corinth who cut their hair short. There's a big hoopah over that because Christian women didn't have flowing hair all the way down. But what the thing was with the hair, at the temple of Aphrodite, there was 1,000 prostitutes that worked in that temple. And, prostitutes identify themselves. That's how they pick up their johns. A guy can tell it's a prostitute by looking at her. And one of the things that the prostitutes did in order to be recognizable was to do the opposite of what all women did. All women let their hair be long. So what did the prostitutes do? They cut off their hair. They cropped their hair. They made it short. And then on Sunday morning, here were these women coming to church services, and they had their hair cropped. Why? Oh, it was cool. They were going to be like the prostitutes were. They were trying to look like the world, and it was wrong in doing that. When you talk about a length of hair, how do we define it? 6 inches, 5 inches, as long as my finger, as long as your finger? How do we define these things? You have to be very careful. Here we're talking about a husband and a wife. I think they can figure out what's modest, proper, and moderate. A Christian woman wants to be these things. You don't have to grill it in. The person who has the heart of God is going to want to be modest or proper. And sometimes these things get out of control. And we create problems that could have been avoided, I think. Maybe with just a little talk. Anyway, that's what Peter said. They're not to be adorning themselves merely outward with braided hair, gold, or pearls, or costly garments. Don't stop there. But that which is proper for women professing godliness with good works. That's what she adorns herself with. Good works. She's a good person. She's got a good heart. And she's out to do good things. If she sees a need, she takes care of it. She's a good person. And everybody can see that she's a good person. A good person is more attractive than a person who is not good, who dresses enticingly. There is nothing more beautiful than a person with a good heart. That's the most attractive person of all, I believe. And God, I think, likes that too. At least that's what he says. And we all know when we're not doing what we ought to. If I want to live the Christian life, and I'm going to try to entice women, imagine that. I was going to try to entice women so I can be with women, have women, and all that stuff. My religion is just a sham. It's all a sham. I don't know why I would even do that. If I was going to live that way, I'd leave the church alone and go live that way. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart. That's the inner person, the heart. It's what Paul was talking about, the woman professing godliness with good works. That's what a person is. They're good. They're good in the heart. They're just a good person, and they do good with incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. This heart is incorruptible. Beauty is, short-lived. Beauty becomes ugly. Okay, it doesn't matter who you are. It's going to fall apart. Everything falls apart with time. Somebody might be beautiful in their 20s. I guarantee you live long enough, you're going to lose that. You better not count on beauty to make you popular. Better the incorruptible beauty, the beauty that never grows old, the beauty that continues to beautify, and that is the gentle and quiet spirit. A person who is given to God on the inside. Very precious in the sight of God. The person who is a partaker of the divine nature. That's what we're doing, or supposed to be doing. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by renewing your mind. Taking on the mind of Christ. That's what we're supposed to be doing. A woman who's trying to look like the prostitutes in the temple of Aphrodite, she never met the Lord, or she wouldn't be trying to do that. Why would you want to look like a prostitute? In this manner, in former times, holy women who trusted in God also adorned themselves. It's always been the case. Godly women have always adorned themselves from the inside out. It was always the heart that they were concerned with, transforming themselves into the Lord Jesus Christ. That was what they were attempting to do, not so much being attractive on the outside, though it's right to do that to a degree, being submissive to their own husbands, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good and are not afraid with any terror. The word Lord didn't mean then what it means now. The word Lord, I think, would be the equivalent of our word Mr. or Sir, something like that, a term of respect. That's the way Sarah talked to Abraham, in a respectful way. Is Peter saying the wife has to call her husband Sir or Mr.? No, but with respect when she speaks to her husband, not speaking down to him, but speaking to him as he is the head of the house. Husbands, likewise, dwell with them with understanding. The husband is to understand the situation of the life that the wife has to live, the complexity she has to deal with, all of the problems of womanhood. The husband is to be understanding towards the life she lives, giving honor to the wife. That's what the husband tries to do. The woman is to be submissive to the man. The husband is to honor his wife. How does he do that? By recognizing her as the weaker vessel, physically weaker than he is. He shouldn't be carrying pans of concrete on top of her head while he sits under a shade tree. She's the weaker vessel physically. He ought to understand that and give honor to her as being heirs together of the grace of life. She is going to heaven one day. And the husband is to recognize that fact. She's not inferior to him. She's his equal. And they are working together trying to get through the pearly gates. And that your prayers, sir, may not be hindered. If he doesn't treat his wife with the honor she's entitled to, then God doesn't want to talk with him. He doesn't want to hear from such a man. And he won't. He won't listen to him. If the house operates under these conditions, God's conditions, the chances of the family being successful are greatly enhanced. If not, we got a problem. I think we're about out of time. Are we, Roy? 1 minute? Well, we'll read this anyway. Living the good life, verses 8 through 12. Finally, he's going to summarize this section of his discourse. Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. Love as brothers. Be tender-hearted. Be courteous, not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling. If you have a King James Bible, right there it'll say railing for railing. What that means, reviling or railing, is chiding someone or mocking someone. Jesus was on the cross. If you be the Son of God, come down from there. Okay, that's reviling. Okay, provoking someone. Don't be that way. But on the contrary, be a blessing, knowing that you were called to this kind of a life, that you may inherit a blessing from the Lord. For he who would love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous. His ears are open to their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Whenever I read verse 10 there, he who would love life and see good days, the church at Philadelphia always comes to my mind. In the book of Revelation, the story content, as you know, is the Roman Empire is going to fall. And there's going to be destruction and chaos all over the earth. And God told the church at Philadelphia in Revelation chapter 3 that he would keep them from all of that. It's as though he was going to put his big hands around the saints at Philadelphia and keep them from suffering the consequences that others are going to have to suffer, because he loved them and he was going to take care of them. He who would love life and see good days, keep the church at Philadelphia in mind.